My name is Michael Bloom with the Internet Association. We're a trade association here in Washington, D.C., representing over 40 leading global internet companies. And on behalf of our members, we're very, very pleased to have been one of the sponsors and organizers for this terrific event today. Just quickly introduce the next panel. Starting to my left here is Tal Niv, the Vice President of Law and Policy at Github, Nora Puckett, Senior Litigation Counsel at Google, Jacob Rogers, Legal Counsel at the Wikimedia Foundation, and Peter Stern, the Manager for Risk Policy at Facebook. With that.
Thank you all, and thank you for inviting us to speak here. Really appreciate the opportunity. So, as many of the speakers have noted, or at least implied, the content moderation practices are often, if not the derivative, definitely not independent from what the platform does, what content it handles, who its users are. So I'll take that as an excuse to speak about GitHub just a little bit, promise not to dwell. So GitHub is the world's largest software development platform. And what does that mean? It means that GitHub is being used in order for users to upload code, to collaborate on code, to use code that has been posted by others. At the heart of GitHub is a source control, source version system, and that means that the most powerful thing is that it allows many users to coordinate on files with all of the changes being tracked. And that makes it a very useful system for users who want to collaborate on many different types of content. So even though the platform is directed mostly at software development, we see other types of content on GitHub, and it's being used in exactly the same way every time. So in terms of the volume and the numbers, GitHub hosts a community of 27 million users worldwide. And that includes individual developers, it includes companies, and many of the companies represented here have public pages on GitHub where they consolidate their open source project work. We see NGOs, we see government who have a public GitHub page, again, for coordinating their open source project work and for other things. In terms of how the content is handled, it's mainly organized in repositories that represent projects, and we have 85 million of those, so quite a bit. So I bet you were already able to get that from all that I've said, but as I mentioned, all of our users, or most of our users, are software professionals. So they can be veteran software developers, they can be beginner software developers, they can be people who are learning how to code, and we see many universities, many code academies on GitHub. And it can be users who support the development process, so designers, people who write technical documentation, lawyers, tech lawyers, marketers, salespeople, etc. on GitHub, but what is shared among them is that they engage in the software development process. So that to us means that we are dealing with users with affinity that is built in, and that means that they are almost a natural community. All of them are potential future collaborators, and that makes it easy on us than it is for some of those platforms. And so for us, the challenge is not to ruin it for them. So to make sure we're contributing to productive communities and not superseding decisions that they may want to make. So that, again, is at the basis of our content moderation approach. And another thing that is very important, and it has to do with all of that, the type of content, the ready-made communities that we have, is that we have to make sure that the contribution happens in a safe and productive environment, to which contributors feel confident to contribute, to which they feel confident to contribute even when they're just making their first steps in coding, to which they feel comfortable contributing their mentorship, and so on and so forth. At the same time, it also means that we must make sure not to intervene too much, to respect decisions of contributors and maintainers of those communities, of those software development projects, And we have to respect the fact that even though we know the subject matter, we are all, in a sense, technical contributors as well. We have to understand that we can't always understand the context of a contribution to a software project. And so we have to rely on the governance decisions of our community and not to supersede it with our own, so that we can cultivate expression, we can cultivate creativity, and we nurture that wherever it happens. In addition, and I assume that that was also clear, we often have companies working on GitHub, and those companies have a legitimate expectation of handling their own content moderation and governance practices. So again, even though all of that is true, we are found in a position where the code is in public, everybody can come across a project and wish to contribute to it. So we really have to navigate that, respect governance decisions that we see, but also to make sure that safety and trust and confidence is there and built in. And if we do that badly, and that's really a day-to-day challenge, we might push a lot of software development from the public space into the private space. We have private repositories on GitHub, but we really want to promote open source collaboration. We understand the value of contributing software that can be used as building blocks in the development of other projects. So this is really a crucial decision that we have to make on the day-to-day, and our content moderation practices have to consider that and just be good content moderation practices, whatever that means. But again, those are the challenges that we are faced with. Another aspect of that is that we really have to make sure that our takedowns, when we deem that they're necessary, are narrow. So again, what comes from understanding software development practices, and maybe I'll show you an example of it. Yes, I have a slide for that, but they involve the contribution of many, many people over different periods in time. So often, even though a full project is identified as the part that needs to be taken off of GitHub, when we're willing to take a look at what it needs to be the subject of the takedown, or what we think might need to be the subject of the takedown, we see that it's sometimes just a file in a project, or even less than that, a few lines of code, a comment that's been placed on code. And so a willingness to engage with the community back and forth, the target of the takedown, the origin of the takedown, allows us to get to this narrow outcome, which is beneficial, again, considering that our projects are often building blocks for other projects, that projects are the outcome of contributors in many given points in time. So again, at the risk of reiterating what I've said, it's really important that our contributors know that once they've invested so much time and effort into making contributions to software code, that if it can remain online, it will. And we can't be hasty when we decide to take so much time and effort down, even though it sometimes seems like the easiest decision to make. So in terms of how it works exactly, or not, yes, oh, fantastic. This is a very simple slide that was supposed to convey simple information about the 4 pillars, and I've worked very hard to make it intelligible. I think that requires a lot of talent to get that to that outcome, but just ignore this for a second. 4 different pillars are engaged in content moderation at GitHub, have a hand in setting the policies, in implementing the policies, in building tools that allow the projects. Please don't stare at it. It really conveys zero information at this point. And all of that are 4 teams. They consist of around 15 people out of 800. I leave it to you to decide whether it's too little or too many. It depends on whether I'm in headcount mode the day that I think about that. So I'd like to start with the support team. So in the support team, we have a specialized sub-team that we call the Terms of Service support, or in short, TOS support. This is a team that is built of technical users, so software developers themselves, or people who understand software development well, understand the community, understand what an open source project is, understand what a proprietary project is. And so they are the ones who engage in intake of any reports that we might have, take down abuse reports, and they understand it very carefully. They make as much effort as they can to understand the context and to understand what they are seeing in front of them. And in order to do their job, they rely on our user-facing policies, our terms of service, our corporate terms of service, our community guidelines, etc., and the system that we think of as established precedents. So sometimes we engage with cases that are difficult, that we all have to contribute to in order to interpret what we need to do. And so those cases we often end up citing to one another in order to come to conclusions on what to do in other cases. And so once that precedent is sufficiently mature, we try to build it into the policy, and that is often the reason for an iteration of the policy. So again, the goal is to make sure that our users know what they would be faced with and what decisions we will make at any given stage. The TOS support team is working very, very closely on the day-to-day with a second team that I'd like to talk about. Again, I tend to dwell and talk about that team too much, but that's the legal support team, part of the legal team that does product legal support, and they serve as the escalation point for the TOS support team every time a legal intervention is necessary or legal analysis is necessary. And this team is also the team that provides product support to the community and safety team, which I will talk about later, but that builds the tools for community governance. So for both of those teams, the goal is really to provide prompt response while making efficient human judgment in every single case. Now, two things that I want to mention that I think would be interesting to you here that we do that I think are quite unique, or I shouldn't say that. If you know of other cases, I'd love to hear about them. But the legal team at GitHub is the maintainer of our policies. And now I'll get to a slide that I think, oh, it's interesting. So the legal team is the maintainer of our site policies, and I use the term maintainer here very intentionally because it's a term out of open source software development, and it means that it's a team that manages all of the contributions to a software project. So in this case, last year, we took the step of open sourcing all of our user policies under the CC0 license. And you see them there, or you can't see anything because the type is too small, but take a look later when you get a chance. All of our user-facing policies are on this website. And in this way, we invite our users to make direct contributions to our policies. Again, everything is out in the open and eternally out in the open because of the value of the source control system at the basis of GitHub. So in this way, our legal team engages with those contributions from users. And the way that users make contributions is that they open what we call forks that are basically copies of this software project, the policy project, and they make contributions, and then they ask for the contributions to be merged into the original. And the legal team sees all that, again, in the open and makes decision on which changes to adopt, which to reject, and explains why it does so. Another way for users to contribute to our policies is by creating issues, is what they're called, and that's a way for asking questions about the policies. And again, the legal team, as the maintainer, has the obligation to engage with the question, respond in some way, and again, that suggests something about the logic of interpretation, and again, it's out there in the open, very transparent, and this you can see there for each of our policies. And we have many reasons for choosing this method for updating our terms, but again, it provides a constant or an ongoing feedback mechanism to our terms of service. And of course, it reinforces the community that feels like they're engaged in setting the policies. They're able to understand the policies because they have a person to ask in a way that is not directly related to a specific case, but also general as far as the general interpretation goes. The team that provided the backwind for this decision is the policy team, a separate team at GitHub that is responsible for public policy decisions as they impact software, again, our advocacy efforts, etc., and the effort to drive new standards to contribute to best practices. So that team helped explain to all the stakeholders the value in open sourcing our terms of service in this way. A separate aspect that I think is interesting in what we're doing is that we maintain two public repositories for our government takedowns and for our DMCA takedowns. And as soon as the support team makes a decision that we have to act on a takedown, they close to real time update that repository with that information. Again, our users can see that continuously. Again, we think that that's very, very important because we don't have to wait for our transparency report every year to get a sense of the state of takedowns in each of those topics. Again, we are always iterating and trying to improve that, but that's where you are. You can see both repositories. Finally, the community and safety team, the decisions that that team makes, this is a product team that builds tools, is based on inputs from those three other teams, and they build tools that are intended for community moderation. So one of the first decisions that that team took was to develop an easy way for a project to adopt a code, to have a code of governance, to contribute, to add to their contributor guidelines, to have a code of conduct. We make it very easy. We make it easy on a project to decide when to stop a conversation, to put a halt to it, to take down content that isn't fruitful or isn't productive or doesn't contribute anything to the project or what it's all about. So lastly, I think I'll just say that you may have noticed that GitHub is a little different. Each platform is different, but in the sense that we appeal to a specialized audience of professionals that handle or contribute to software development, but many of the issues that other platforms reckon with apply to us, and at the policy level, we have to keep watch all of the time because often we see efforts that just handle all of us in the same way without making accommodations for different types of content, different types of users, different types of activities, and that's something that we have to keep watch for. Again, we're very fortunate to be able to contribute to the conversation, again, and try to work with other companies to develop better practices, and I think that's what we're trying to do with our site policy, and also in trying to contribute to conversation like we're having here today. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nora Puckett. I'm from Google. And Google, we have a number of different products and platforms. We have our search engine, Google Search. We have platforms where we host content like YouTube and Blogger. And then we have products like Gmail or G Suite, as well as some cloud enterprise products. So it's a pretty diverse array of products and issues that we're dealing with. And to think about content moderation at Google, it's helpful to think of two branches. One are legal removals. And those are instances in which users or governments reach out to us and ask us to remove content that they believe violates applicable local law. Content policies are policies that we set about what kind of content we do and don't want on our platforms. And this includes things like terrorist content, hate speech, harassing content. Content policies also address more scaled abuse issues like spam and malware. And we enforce these policies, but we also respond quickly to notifications from users that they believe content violates our policies, and this can come in the form frequently of user flags. So I thought I'd first talk about what the policies are, talk a little bit about the teams that work on these issues, and then finally talk about some best practices that we apply at Google. So in terms of policies, I'll start with legal removals. And generally speaking, where a user or government reaches out to us and identifies content that they say violates local law, we determine if we do think it violates the local law, and where the request meets other criteria, like being sufficiently specific and something we can actually identify, then we do a removal in the relevant jurisdiction. There are instances in which we do global removals, for example, for copyright infringing content or child sexual exploitation imagery, but generally the removals are in the locale where the law is at issue. In order to understand kind of how legal removals work, I think it's really useful to look at our legal removals website, and in particular the web form that we ask users to use when they're making that kind of a request. Because I think if you look at the questions that we prompt you to answer, it kind of gives you an understanding of how we apply our policies. So first we ask you to identify what product you're talking about. Is it search, is it Blogger, is it something else? Once you've responded to that, we try to get an understanding of what your issue is. And this is a good way for us to make sure that what you're asking about is really a legal removal versus some other issue. For example, if you're dealing with a content policy violation, we'll make sure the people that address content policies are the ones who are handling it. Or if you're looking to, for example, recover your Gmail password, you belong somewhere else entirely, and we'll try to direct you to the right place. Once you've gotten through that series of questions, we ask you what the legal issue is. And again, this is a means of us making sure that we can quickly get you to the right people that handle those kind of requests. So if you're a US user and you're identifying copyright infringing content, we're going to get you the people that handle DMCA requests. If you're a European user who's seeking to have search results delisted because you say they're no longer relevant or accurate or timely, consistent with a Casteja decision in 2014, then we'll get you the people that handle our European privacy removals or the right to be forgotten type removals. Once those teams assess those removals requests, and if it seems to be appropriate, then we do the removal in the local jurisdiction. At the same time, unless we're specifically prohibited by law enforcement or otherwise, we report our removals to Lumen, which is the Berkman Center website, where we and a number of other companies try to create transparency around the removals that we're doing. And at the same time, we report metrics about the removals that we're doing in our transparency report. And I think at this point, we have statistics related to copyright removals, as well as the European privacy or right to be forgotten removals, and more recently have added information about removals that we do pursuant to our YouTube community guidelines, although those are content policies, less legal removals. So that's generally how the legal removals team policies work. Content policies are different. And they kind of run the spectrum depending on which Google product you're talking about. And so at the one end of the spectrum is something like Google Search. Now, search is an index of what appears in the web, and by and large, most of the sites that appear in search are not ones where Google is actually hosting content. And so for search, we do removals. We will delist sites for copyright infringement, for child sexual exploitation imagery, and obviously in Europe, we do it for the right to be forgotten. We also have webmaster guidelines that speak to the scaled abuse issues. So you may see sites that are demoted or delisted if they're engaging in certain kinds of web spam that's pretty egregious, like link schemes or doorway domains, those types of things. On the other end of the spectrum, though, is something like YouTube. And so with YouTube, which is a hosted platform, we want to ensure that we have a safe and vibrant community for our users. And so we have community guidelines that set forth the kind of content we do and don't want on YouTube. And so YouTube community guidelines prohibit things like pornographic content, content that promotes hatred or incites violence, for example. And with YouTube, there's a number of ways that we enforce our policies. We've got automated means or automated flags that flag content that we think violates our policies. There are human reviewers working at YouTube. But we also rely on our community of users. And that includes a community of users that we call trusted flaggers. And those are users or organizations that are particularly interested in and effective at flagging content that violates the YouTube community guidelines. And we've found that they can be as much as 90% effective in flagging this kind of content. And to give you kind of a sense of the scale that we're operating at, in Q4 2017, we removed over 8.2 million videos that violated our community guidelines. And those were based on flags that were automated, but also from user flags, both from trusted trusted users and people that are not in that, I'm not saying they're not trusted, but they're just not in the trusted user category. And so of those videos, about 6.5 million of them were flagged by automated means. About 1.1 million were flagged by these trusted flagger users, and around 400,000 were flagged by regular YouTube users. And to give you an understanding of how much flagging is happening, I think in that same time period, we got something like 28 million flags on YouTube. And to talk about some of the automated means that we're using, the automated flags are effective, but they're also a way that we can create even better machine learning classifiers. So once we get automated flags that are flagging potentially problematic content, we have human reviewers that verify that the flags are accurate. But once they've done so, we're able to use those flags to train machine learning algorithms. And I think that's not only effective in identifying content, but also in making sure that it gets removed as quickly as possible. So for example, I think something like 75% of videos that we are able to flag with the automated flags are taken down before there are any views on them. And we've gotten to the point where with certain types of content, like violent extremism, we are able in 70% of instances through automated flagging to get those videos down in less than 8 hours. And for nearly half, they're coming down in less than 2 hours. So the teams are operating at a huge scale, but again, it's this combination of automated and human review. We have other teams that work on different products and apply similar means. So for example, with Google Play, we have a content policy operations team. We have trust and safety teams for our ads products like AdWords and AdSense. So to talk a little bit more about the teams and the people that are actually working on these issues, our legal removals team are made up of people that we generally call legal specialists or legal assistants. And they come from a wide variety of educational backgrounds. Some people work in the hard sciences, some people have worked in journalism, some are more or less interested in going to law school or less interested at the end of their tenure as working on the legal removals team. But in any event, they're people that are dedicated and obviously hardworking and able to handle not only the operational issues, which is the huge volume of removals requests that we're getting, but able to balance that with the need to assess the accuracy of the removal request while also dealing with the competing concerns of free speech and free expression rights that are implicated when you're asking to remove content. And the way that we organize our legal removals team members is generally by some form of expertise. Some speak relevant language, and so they will be handling requests that come from certain nations or from people who speak those languages. Other people have developed specialties in particular issues, so some people really love dealing and thinking about copyright issues, so they're generally the ones dealing with the copyright requests. And other people are less involved in handling the day-to-day incoming requests and more working on trying to create better tooling so that we can continue to deal with the volume of the requests that we're getting. And just to understand kind of the volume that they're working at, if you just think about right-to-be-forgotten removals, since 2014, we've gotten something like requests for 2.5 million URLs to be removed from search by European users invoking the Castella decision. And we've removed something upwards of 940,000 URLs since that decision came out. Just to understand the content policy operation, like I said, we have different names for different teams depending on what product you're working on. And again, these are people that are working both on the kind of human review aspect of it, but they're also dealing with the more automated aspect and working on our tools and developing machine learning algorithms. And in 2010, Google will have, sorry, not 2010, 2018, we will have 10,000 people working on content moderation issues at Google, and that includes both our content policies as well as our legal removals team. So I thought it would be worth talking about some of our best practices, and I think these are ones that we've already heard about from the panelists on the last panel, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot about these issues today. So perhaps like the first pillar of a best practice from our perspective is transparency. And transparency comes in a number of forms. One is we publish a lot of information about what we're doing in terms of our help center content, our terms of service, the policies that we apply are all available for review, and we try to provide exemplars so that when you are interacting with our platforms, you know what kind of content you can and cannot post. Another key part of transparency is our relationship with Lumen and our ability to, unless otherwise prohibited, post this content so that people can take a look at exactly what kind of content is being removed. And I know we're not alone in having a relationship with Lumen. I mean, I think that's useful, both because it's certainly inspired academic research, but it also has helped Google and other companies identify instances in which people have been trying to abuse these processes. A few years ago, I think you'll remember Professor Volokh had come out with all of those reports and others about fake court orders or instances in which people were sending companies real court orders, but where they had fake defendants. And I think when you have more information out there, I think it's sometimes easier to identify those issues. And finally, we have our transparency report, which we continue to work on and which has been growing over the years. The other best practice is quality control and training. And that means not just training the people when they start working for us, but to continuously update those trainings, especially as we're seeing new trends and issues that we have to address on either the legal removal or content policy side. Another aspect of that is quality control. And we encourage people on these teams to check in with each other about what they're doing, especially in the hard cases. We also encourage escalation. And escalation can mean checking in with your manager, but it can also mean bringing in other stakeholders, whether those are product experts, product counsel. We have regional counsel working in various parts of the globe that also can weigh in on what are the applicable local laws and how to understand them. Litigation occasionally gets involved, and we also have specialists who deal with like copyright counsel or trademark counsel. And we also have certain automated means to help us in engaging in quality control, whether that's just making sure that from time to time we check in to make sure that things are escalated appropriately. So that's generally the picture of how we do things at Google.
All right, so let me give an introduction to the Wikimedia Foundation, and then I'll get into the details of our various content moderation efforts and how we approach the issues. So I'm sure most of you have heard of Wikipedia, but I'm not sure if everyone has heard of Wikimedia. So we are the nonprofit company that hosts Wikipedia and its various sister projects. We have a mission of making the world's knowledge freely available under free licenses or in the public domain to as many people as possible. The site is very large. Wikipedia collectively gets something like 500 million unique visitors a month, and there are about 10 edits every second. But the foundation is fairly small. Unlike a lot of the companies that are here today, our total staff worldwide is only 300 people. And most of the work on the actual projects is done by a group of volunteers that are spread around worldwide. The volunteer community for Wikipedia can be done by anyone. The encyclopedia and related projects are in over 280 different languages, and any member of the public can edit. The sites are even open in such a way that you don't have to make an account to edit Wikipedia. You can just click edit and make changes to an article. There are, however, millions of editor accounts for people that are regular editors and are making edits in all of these different languages constantly. In addition to that, the community of editors is a self-governing community or set of communities in most cases. That is, the editors write their own policies. So when we have community policies on the various languages of Wikipedia, those are not written or enforced by the foundation. Instead, they are written by the volunteers through a consensus process in which people that are involved will have discussions on discussion pages and work on the policies and then decide what they want. And each language is its own separate project. So for example, you will get content policies in English language that might be more open to various different types of content that might reflect a more American view of free expression, but you'll also get separate policies on many of the European languages that may legally be allowed to host certain content, or they may be legally unclear, but they will decide that they don't want to have that content in their language because the mentality and thinking of the group of people working in that language is more along the lines of the European view of free expression that Tiffany talked about this morning. Also of note, the Wikimedia movement generally started as a movement in 2001, a couple of years before the foundation was founded. So the foundation itself is created as a nonprofit in order to support the broader free knowledge movement. It was a group of volunteers writing an encyclopedia first and a company second. So the foundation has a number of different values for the content that we try to support. The first one is the free knowledge and free culture community. That is, the contributors to Wikipedia are aiming to provide content that is freely available to anyone to use for any purpose. And we at the foundation try and support that as much as possible. The second one is to protect user privacy. Work on Wikipedia is done in the public, but people are able to edit under pseudonyms, and we try and protect that aspect of privacy as people are contributing content. The third one is to try and protect this user and self-governing community model and give people as wide a space as possible to make their own decisions. So when we're looking at content at the foundation, we are looking to figure out what is clearly lawful or unlawful, or where the gray areas are, and try and get those gray areas clarified, because we want the community to be able to make their own decisions wherever possible, rather than the Wikimedia Foundation being required to overrule them in some way. We also aim to act responsibly towards unlawful content, and where there are clear rules requiring that something be removed, we do so. And we also will sometimes take action in situations that are particularly problematic for the user model. For example, if someone is especially technically adept at evading user actions, we can sometimes take an action that is from the technical back end of things to help make sure that someone is not causing technical problems or disrupting the site. And lastly, we have a value of transparency towards the work we're doing. We do a biannual transparency report at transparency.wikimedia.org, where we report on the various types of requests we receive for content takedowns, as well as requests for private information about users. The overall team is quite small. As I mentioned, the entire company is only about 300 people. Of that, the legal team that works on these issues is 9 lawyers, 2 paralegals, and between 3 and 5 short-term fellows at any given time. The trust and safety team is 8 people, 3 in trust and safety operations, which helps with like the actual legal removals and changes to the site, as well as some technical coding. And then 5 people in policy and community work, which helps to facilitate community discussions and work on areas of developing community policies or some of the necessary foundation policies for unlawful content. Even within that, not everyone works on content removal. The average workflow for incoming content removal requests is something like 1 to 2 lawyers, 1 to 2 fellows, and 1 or 2 of the operations people at any given time, with others only getting involved if something is escalating or becomes a larger issue in some way. In addition to that set of teams, we do have a few engineers working specifically on tools for the volunteers. Our philosophy at Wikimedia is that AI should be used in combination with humans, so we don't do any automated removals, but we have a number of tools that can rate content in various ways and draw attention to that content to volunteers working on doing the moderation efforts. So for example, there is a tool called ORS, which will rate the quality of edits people make to different articles. And if you are a volunteer administrator going through new edits that have been made, you can use the ORS tool to see if a new edit is likely to be problematic in some way with fairly good accuracy. I think it's in the realm of between 70 and 90%, depending on exactly what type of content it's looking at. So if you're trying to work quickly and efficiently, you can review particularly bad or problematic edits very quickly using that tool. There's also a tool that is still in development but is nearly finished. That is a user interaction timeline. This is for like the anti-harassment type of work, where it can very quickly and clearly pull up many different interactions that 2 users have had on Wikipedia in multiple different places, like discussions about different articles and different topics, and allow an administrator to see overall the types of conversations the 2 users have been having, and therefore determine if there is harassment going on or not. The whole team that develops those kind of tools is about 3 to 5 engineers and occasional consultation with 1 or 2 of the lawyers. So again, everything is quite small in our case. Because of this size, we also hear about issues in, I would say, a relatively informal way. Unlike Google or Facebook beside me, we don't have a clear flagging and reporting system that is a totally separate computer system. Instead, we either get messaged through the regular Wikimedia platform or through email addresses that people can contact the foundation at. Occasionally, administrators who are very frequent contributors will be just chatting with people on other channels like IRC as well, and will flag things to people in that way. But it is a relatively informal process for a relatively small amount of requests. And I would want to flag that because the community is doing so much of this work, and because they are dedicated to these free culture values, they are handling the lion's share of the work. The foundation itself is only getting something in the realm of 300 to 500 content requests per year, which is many, many orders of magnitude, I think, smaller than a lot of other companies. And I think that that is because the community is acting as the first line in these cases and handling the majority of things. It is also worth noting in this space that the community is much more restrictive, I think, than many other communities on many websites. Again, because of this free knowledge, free culture movement, and this desire to have the content be reusable by anyone for any purpose, the community policies are often more strict than the legal requirements. So you'll see, for example, that many languages in Wikipedia don't accept fair use copyright images at all. Even though they could potentially have them, they've just decided as a blanket rule that they don't want them because it adds confusion to people who are trying to reuse images from Wikipedia. With that said, the types of requests that we usually get at the Wikimedia Foundation fall into a few broad categories. The primary ones, I think, are defamation and copyright. That is, somebody either looks at an article and says, I don't like what is written here, it's not accurate for some reason, or I don't like this picture or media file on the article, it belongs to me and you need to take it off. Occasionally, we will also receive requests for Wikipedia local policy or for private information, and even more occasionally for anti-harassment or child protection related issues. When we receive these types of requests, we generally have a few possible responses. In many cases, we actually play a role between the legal and trust and safety folks of educating people. A lot of information is available online, or requests can be resolved by working with the various communities, and so we help people understand the editing model and how they can work with volunteers to resolve a request. Occasionally, we will also refer things directly to the volunteers if it's just something that is not presenting a legal issue or any other issue that the foundation would take action on. And in some cases, we have the options of either removing content directly, for example, if there are appropriate DMCA requests that are actual copyright violations, and in some cases, we also have the option of banning users. For example, if someone is a repeat violator or is harassing people across multiple projects. I would note in particular for removal on Wikipedia, it happens rarely enough that there is a certain Streisand effect related to that. The Streisand effect refers to the attempts by Barbara Streisand to remove pictures of her estate that instead went viral because people were reporting on her attempts to remove them. And so there is some risk if you try to get something removed from a Wikipedia article that it can, if it is a notable enough removal, it can actually be noticed and reported on by other news and instead become something that is much more widely seen than it was previously. So overall, we aim at the foundation to try and evaluate these requests, each one individually. Again, because of this small number, we on the legal team and in the trust and safety teams are able to actually review each one of these individual things and have a human determination made on them. And so that is our, in combination with the volunteers handling the rest of the requests, that is our overall approach to the model of content moderation at scale.
Thanks very much. My name is Peter Stern. I'm with the product policy team at Facebook in Menlo Park, California. Really glad to be here today, and I appreciate the work of Eric and the other organizers for bringing us in. We found the event in Santa Clara and then today as well to be a very good way to talk to people about what we're doing and to get useful information from other companies too. So I want to give you some nuts and bolts on information on how Facebook approaches content moderation. And I've organized my remarks based on 4 elements of the process, roughly corresponding to 4 sets of teams that we have as part of the process. The first will be product policy. That's the team that I'm a part of. Then community operations, community integrity, and finally I want to say a word about escalations. So product policy, who are we, what do we do? Our team at the moment consists of over 60 people around the world in 11 offices by my count. We come from a variety of different backgrounds that I think really add to the policymaking process that we're in charge of. We have people with backgrounds at NGOs, government service, teachers, lawyers like myself. I'm a lawyer by training, and it's a really rich mix that we have of ideas and inputs. And the main thing that we do that is relevant to the topic of content moderation is to create our community standards. The community standards are the rules that govern what people are allowed to share on Facebook. They're really at the core of the content moderation process. So let me say a bit about them. The community standards cover the full range of policies that we apply on Facebook. Everything from bullying and harassment to terrorism, authentic identity, and many other areas. These standards are public, they're on our website, and they're also now available in a more expanded version than previously. 2 weeks ago, we were really excited to roll out a version of the community standards that reflects the guidelines that our reviewers implement in their day-to-day work. We had always had a public-facing version of the community standards, but they were somewhat more high-level. Now we have disclosed the full detail behind those standards, so you can really see the substance of the lines that our reviewers are drawing in day-to-day practice. We've really had great interaction with people in the community, including a bunch of people in this room, as part of the rollout process, and we did it for 2 reasons. We want people to understand why we're making the decisions that we are, whether it's something that you see in the news, or you've had a piece of content that got removed, or you reported a piece of content and it didn't get removed and you're wondering why. The added detail will help you to understand that process. And secondly, we want to increase the quality of the discussion around our standards. We know that sometimes we have to make very difficult decisions. People around the world have strong views on where we should be coming out, and the added detail will enable us all to have a better common understanding of some of the challenges we face and some of the decisions we've made, because there's lots of room for improvement based on additional input, and those discussions will be very helpful for us. So on the product policy team, we've got these people. We're divided up into sub-teams. We've got a team devoted to safety. We've got a counterterrorism group. And among others, we've also got my stakeholder engagement team. That's the bulk of what I do these days, reaching out to groups who have input on our policies to try and learn from them, explain what we're doing so we can improve the overall process. A centerpiece of the creation and continual refinement of the community standards is a regular meeting that we have that involves discussion of proposals and consensus building around changes to the community standards. It's a very broad-based effort within the company, brings in people from throughout policy as well as other teams, sort of like a mini legislature almost. And at the end of that, we will either make a change or sometimes we'll decide to stay with the status quo where we are on the policy. So that's where we bring in external views, we bring in views within the company, we try to hash things out, air all the opinions, and make the best decision we can. So that's the lay of the land in terms of product policy, sitting within policy as a whole. I now want to talk about a second and even larger team, and that's what we call community operations. Community operations is the apparatus that's responsible for implementing the policies that the policy organization creates. It's a large group. if you look broadly at all of the people at Facebook involved in safety and security, which includes content reviewers, people who are creating tools to fight spam and fake accounts, people who are involved in specific issues of child safety. By the end of 2018, that number will grow to 20,000 from 10,000 approximately a year ago. Within that group, we have currently about 7,500 people who are reviewing content. They cover 40+ languages and operate 24/7 on a worldwide basis. The issue of language is really important. A number of people have hit on this already, but language and cultural context are really central. So we're often looking to fill certain language spots because we feel that there's a need. Either we need more expertise, or we just need more manpower. So that's the process that builds up the core of people who are doing the review. We have people who are full-time employees, contractors, as well as outsourcers throughout the world. So those are the content reviewers that we bring to bear. What is it that they're doing? Okay, so content moderation for us is a combination of automation and human review. Automation helps us deal with certain lower order types of policy violations such as spam and nudity. And automation also helps us improve our overall process by flagging content for humans to review and by allowing the process to get more efficient, speedier, prioritizing certain types of reports, getting them to people who have the right language expertise. But as a number of people on this panel and other panels have noted, humans play a central role in the process because of their special skill at understanding the context of reports and what's going on the ground. That's really crucial for us. When we are training reviewers, a big part of what we do is to try and make their instruction be as rigid, as prescriptive as we can. We want them to implement the rules as they have been determined by the product policy team and the policy organization as a whole. We don't want them to be interpreting on the fly. So we try to break things down into a very detailed level, tracking the substance of the guidelines that are now out there on the web. When reports come in, the reviewers, having learned our policies, will review the content. If the content doesn't violate, it will stay up. If it does violate, it will come down. That's the fundamental way that the process works. Sometimes there are misunderstandings about the way in which multiple reports do or don't affect the process. It only takes one report for a policy violation to be removed on Facebook. Multiple reports don't increase the likelihood that a particular piece of content will be removed. And indeed, after a certain point, we have automation that shuts off the review so that we don't have 1,000 people reviewing the same piece of content that has already been determined not to violate. That's one of the ways that we use automation. We get millions of reports a week, and we're generally able to turn around those reports, review them within 24 hours. One of the things that automation helps us to do is to route issues of safety and terrorism more quickly into the queues, so we prioritize them. People look at them faster, we get quicker results, and if necessary, we may reach out to law enforcement where we see an indication of real-world harm. That does happen on occasion. When a reviewer is looking at a piece of content and determines that it doesn't violate, that's the end of the story. The piece of content is ignored. If a violation is found, then the reviewer will look at a hierarchy of options and do some labeling, identifying the nature of the violation. This is very important for us because it helps us with user messaging. We have, over time, been able to get to a position where most of the messaging that we provide to users indicates the nature of the violation that occurred and that gave rise to the action that we're taking. If you look, for example, at some of the screenshots that we put out when we explained our both our expanded community standards and also the new appeals process that we've created, which I think my colleague Kate Sullivan is going to talk about more this afternoon on the transparency panel. You'll see that the person whose content was removed is given an indication of the nature of the violation so that they will understand why it came down. They can see what we've done. They can determine whether they want to appeal or take other kinds of actions. So those are the main lines of our content review process. Let me say a few more words about the reviewers who are engaged in this process in the community operations organization. Training is extremely important to us. All of the reviewers, when they're hired, have detailed in-person training to absorb our standards. At that time, they're also given resiliency training. And as Del mentioned in her presentation, this is something that we recognize is very important. Some of the content that they're faced with is tough stuff. So we ensure that psychological support and wellness resources are made available for all of the reviewers. This is something that we require vendors who supply reviewer services to us to provide for all of the reviewers. It's extremely important. So resiliency and training we maintain as we go along. If we need to do more training, if we're seeing errors, we'll go back and try to address that. Finally, we try to check ourselves by implementing regular weekly audits. This enables us to determine whether reviewers are having difficulty understanding a certain policy, whether a particular reviewer is not being accurate enough. Accuracy and consistency are absolutely at the heart of what we're trying to do. So by undertaking these audits, and then we also audit the auditors, we are trying to ensure that the whole process works smoothly. And there are many elements of feedback loop here as well. If we're finding that reviewers have difficulty understanding a particular policy, it may be that we need to go back and tweak the policy. This is something that the product policy team thinks about a lot, worries about a lot, and trying to make sure that the policies that we come up with can actually be implemented by our reviewers. So we have that connection, and we'll make adjustments to improve the process as necessary. So that's community operations. Now let me say a quick word about community integrity and escalations. Community integrity is the team that creates tools for the community operations team to use. So if you read about, for example, a tool that we may create to spot certain types of images, non-consensual intimate images, for example, sometimes referred to as revenge porn. Community integrity is the team that creates those. We work closely, the product policy team works very closely with them, just as we work closely with community operations, because we all have the same goals. We all want to see our policies implemented properly, and so we work closely together to try and ensure that that happens. And then the other thing the community integrity does is create the tools that the reviewers use. There are special screens that they have that give them information they need to do their job, and that's the work of the community operations, community integrity team. With regard to escalations, this is something that comes up from time to time when we have particularly intense situations or other real-world events tell us that we need to pay particular attention to something. We have a team within product policy that we call strategic response, and they're responsible for bringing together the actions of the company in a coordinated way in these particular moments. So for example, if you think of something like an active shooter situation, the strategic response team would look at what's happening on the platform with regard to this situation. Is the shooter somebody that we need to designate as a terrorist? This could have implications for the way we treat speech that praises or supports the shooter. Are we seeing impersonating accounts for the shooter pop up? Do we need to do a scrub to remove fake accounts that might be created by this situation. There's a series of activities and steps that we would probably want to take in order to really get a handle on the situation. And finally, the strategic response team is also responsible for distilling down the essence of the situation and reporting it up to management so that they have the right visibility and we have the right guidance from them to help us further resolve the situation. So that's the story of content moderation. I mean, we're trying to use the policies and the implementation practices that we've devised to contribute to the mission of the company, to build community and bring the world closer together by creating a system so that people feel safe when they come to the platform, because we know that if they don't feel safe, if they're going to be confronted with terrorist content, hateful content, other types of objectionable content, they won't come to the platform and we won't be able to accomplish our mission. We also want to be sure that everybody has a voice at the end of the day. It's incredibly important to us that people feel they can express the ideas and thoughts and feelings that are important to them with those they care about on the platform, consistent with our policies. So safety, voice, and also fairness. We want to create a system that people will regard as understandable and fair, and basically will trust us, even if they think that in any given instance we might have gotten something wrong, because they recognize the overall process as legitimate. So those are the principles, and those are some of the details behind how we operate.
And I think we're even further behind, so our questioning will be that much more under pressure. I'll take a question that we got from the field. How is content moderation incorporated into your product development pipeline? And I think it's for everybody. Maybe we'll start on the side.
Sure. So, as I mentioned, I think earlier, and this would be a repetition, part of developing content moderation tools is part of developing GitHub, making it better for the community. And so it gets prioritized just like any product improvement would, again, based on input from the content moderation team that have a feel for the types of tools that the community is going to need for content moderation. And this is the way that we prioritize the implementation by the product teams.
At Google, I mean, when we are developing new products or, developing new features, we make sure we take into account either the ways in which the current policies apply to those things or whether we need to revise or refine the existing policies. So it's definitely a crucial part of any product or feature launch.
I mean, I think similarly at Wikimedia, if people are developing new products, there will be a review process, usually by the legal team, where we're looking at whether this would open up possibilities of new content that might violate the law or otherwise cause some problems. The other thing that we have is our product development is done almost entirely in public through online system where community members can comment, and we found that our community of experienced users is actually very vocal about these kinds of issues and will tell us if a new tool is something that they're worried about generating spam or generating low-quality content that would make their efforts at moderation more difficult. So we collaborate with the volunteers to help make sure that those tools are addressing the moderation needs that they have.
I think our approach is similar to that of the other companies. We do our best to think through how a product might be abused, and then we try to ensure that we are able to enforce our existing policies. And if we decide that we need new policies, then we create those and work on ways to enforce those as well.
Because we are so deep into the lunch hour, we are going to shift over to lunch. Tim, do we have an exact time when we think we're going to get started? So let's see how quickly we can get everyone their lunch and get started with getting back to the substance. Thank the panel for another wonderful session.